read so many books last month. We're gonna be sitting here for ages. I hope you guys are ready because it's time for a wrap up. Hello friends, I'm Rosa, welcome to the channel. So, it's a new month, it's October, it's spooky month. However, before we get too far into October, I of course want to do my monthly wrap up, so we'll be talking about all the books that I've read throughout September. Quickly want to note, I have not finished Fable yet, so that'll be in my October wrap up, but as for everything else, I finished 11 books last month. So I think I ended up reading about 5,200 pages or so. It's quite a lot, I feel. So we'll be sitting here for a while, is what I'm trying to say. You better get comfortable, grab a drink, grab a snack if you need. As per usual, I will be leaving links to all the books that I talk about in the description box if you want to check them out. So there'll be links to both Book Depository but also Amazon, just in case you want to check them out. Is there anything else I need to say before we get started? I don't think so. I hope not. Let's just go with it. Okay, so the first book that I want to talk about is actually one that was carried over from last month. Have my book lost some of the foiling? I hope not. Okay, but anyway, in case you weren't aware, I do have a Patreon, so a book club. And every month my patrons decide which book that we're reading together. So we have a primary pick and also a secondary pick. Last month, or in August I suppose it was, actually we had two primary picks. One of them was Twin Crowns. Before we start talking about this though, if you want to check out the book club, just in case, there's a link to it in the pinned comment. But I covered this in a spoilery vlog. I have let out most of my thoughts about this book in that vlog, but we'll talk a little bit about it in this video. This is very typical YA and it's fantasy. So we follow two sisters, twins. One is living at the palace as princess. She's the crown princess, so she's going to be queen sometime very, very soon. And the other one is living with the witches. Now, the witches are kind of seen as dangerous by the people at court. They're also spreading rumors about them to the people. Witches cannot be trusted, you know, that sort of thing. So to change this, the sister that is among the witches actually has made up a plan to remove her twin sister from court, take her place because she can kind of change herself a little bit to look exactly like her, and become queen in her stead. So the book actually starts out by the princess, the crown princess, being kidnapped by her twin but also a dude, and she's then taken off to the witch's place, but the other twin stays at the palace. It's a little bit confusing, but you know, you're basically just thrown straight into it, and that I did like a lot. So, is there anything else I want to say about the plot though? I don't think so. There's something about a possible arranged marriage as well. Not like a trope, but the crown princess is supposed to marry someone who is currently at the palace, and there might be some enemies to lovers situations as well. But I think that's all I want to say about the plot, really. This was a lot of fun though, very much typical YA like I mentioned, but very charming, very fun. The characters, I had a bit of a hard time with both of the characters to start out with. Rose is the crown princess, Ren is the witchy princess, let's just call her that. And Ren was very quick to basically backstab her sister. Have her kidnapped and then take her place. I feel like that was a very quick decision on Ren's part, and I kind of had a hard time respecting her because of that. Rose was annoying me a little bit at the start because she was kind of whiny, but they grew on me and I liked them at the end. I thought their romance was charming as well, at least like one of them. The other one I still kind of question a little bit, but I don't know, it wasn't that bad. I really liked it though. Writing wise, this was fast paced, even though it's actually a chunky book. It's 500 pages. We alternate between the two girls as well, so we change POVs between every chapter, and I like that because you never lose what's going on with one of them. But other than that, I will say some things that happened were a little bit predictable, and towards the end I was confused at certain points because it just kind of felt a little bit too convenient and very quickly wrapped up. And then also there was something with one of the characters that I still don't understand how they just brushed off. But overall, I would say this was a pretty good, a pretty fun book to read. So don't be what is the word, intimidated by it being a 500-page YA. It's very fast-paced. I don't think you'll be bored at any point throughout reading this book. So, Twin Crowns by Catherine Weber and Catherine Doyle. I know I've said this before, but I like how they have the same first name, just spelled in 2 different ways. I think it's very fun. So we got the first one down. Then our... oh gosh. I'm not sure how I can talk about this, but we're gonna try anyway. The book club's primary pick for what month was it? September, not August. Oh gosh, okay. Was My Killer Vacation by Tessa Bailey, which is an adult contemporary romance, think rom-com, but then there's a little bit of a murder mystery sprinkled into it. And I say a little bit because it really did not take up as much space as I thought it was going to. I should have taken the spicy, like the from the blurb seriously and then just timed it by like 10 because this was a whole lot of smut. But anyway, we follow our lead girl whose name is not written on the back of the book, really. Her name is Taylor, though. We follow Taylor, who is a middle grade teacher? A middle grade teacher who's on vacation with her brother Jude. They've gone to Cape Cod because Taylor felt like Jude just needed a break from stuff happening in his life. So they rented a house in Cape Cod, went on vacation, everything was all fine and well until they got to the house. It's a little bit smelly, it's a little bit suspicious. They start taking a look around the house. Things are a little bit weird, and then all of a sudden Taylor finds a body, a dead body, a corpse. That's what it's called, a corpse. And that's their vacation basically ruined, although not entirely. Our other POV is Miles, who is a bounty hunter who's heard of this case from, I think it's like doing a favor for someone. I don't remember what the exact connection is, but he's there as a bounty hunter. He's basically taken on this case to figure out what's happened, and he is super annoyed because Taylor is kind of getting involved in this case without him being okay with it, and he does not want to babysit her. But Taylor is like, listen, I listen to crime podcasts, I know my stuff, you should let me help. And so the two of them start working this case together reluctantly. Is that how you say that? Reluctantly? I'm gonna go with it. And meanwhile, also get a little bit closer to each other, and yeah. So when I said that the murder mystery in this book, I feel like in the synopsis it took up a lot more than it did in the book itself. I feel like this is only a 290-page book, by the way, so for about 100 pages at a time, at some point, at least 70 pages, it was just kind of not mentioned. I don't know if that's the exact number, but at least I felt like it wasn't really mentioned. It was cool seeing them bonding over it, but at the same time, I was expecting a little bit more of a murder mystery than what I got. But instead I got a lot of smut because, oh my gosh. Tessa Bailey definitely needed to get something out of her system. It's a thing, it's a lot. Just want to warn you. Might not be for everyone either because I am not going to give examples, and also I don't want to talk about this in this video. But there's a lot of it in this one, okay? A lot of smut. When it says spicy on the front cover in the blurb, they truly mean it. I also kind of felt a little bit like it was very insta-lusty, and then it kind of turned a little bit insta-lovey. And listen, I am not good with insta-love. We'll talk about that a little bit more throughout this video, but I am not good with it. Especially not in adult contemporary romances. I just feel like it doesn't really... It's contemporary. It's supposed to be based on real life in some weird way. With a lot of humor thrown in there. Okay, a lot of humor. Life is not that funny. That was very depressing. Let's move on. But insta-love, to me at least, is super unrealistic. I mean, it can be done right, I suppose, but I've not come across an example that I feel was realistic. This was instantly, he was very protective because, well, I like her. So you know, that sort of thing. Other than that, I will say it's fun, but it was not amazing. If you are looking for a book that is super smutty, yeah, with a little hint of a murder mystery, you know, you got yourself something here. But I had a good time though. I thought it was funny. but it was not amazing. So the book club's secondary pick for September was Violet Made of Thorns by Gina Chen, which is actually a newer release, and this is young adult fantasy. I'm a little bit at a loss when it comes to summarizing this one, I'm not gonna lie. But we follow Violet, who is a seer. She works at the royal court. So she basically, what she can do is she can prophesize the future, but like there are different threads of futures, if you get what I mean, like different futures for every person, and it's not all set in stone. She also doesn't hear the futures, she more sees them in like pictures, so sometimes the different threads are mixed up when she sees the futures. Is a whole thing. It's better explained in the book. I'm not doing a very good job at it, but Violet, however, is a bit of a liar. She likes to lie to her customers, the nobles, asking her to foresee their futures. She likes to lie to them. She's very prickly, she's very self-protective, and I would say in general is just not having the greatest of time at court. However, is very insistent on keeping her spot at court because she doesn't have anywhere else to go. If it was up to Prince Cyrus though, who is the crown prince, he would have thrown her out of court by now because he basically does not like her, and the fact that she lies so much. They've had a little bit of like, I don't want to call it a rivalry because she's a seer and he's the crown prince. Like there's not anything to compete about, but they've been struggling a little bit to get along throughout all the years that she stayed at court. Violet also keeps having dreams about Cyrus because she actually saved him years ago, and these like god kind of creatures are insisting that he has to die because she basically stole a death from them by saving his life. And so that is the thing as well. Everything's not going great between the two. Cyrus is basically like, when I'm crowned by the end of the summer, you're out of here, okay? And Violet is like, no, I'm not. And then one day, the king talks to Violet, and is basically like, listen, for the upcoming ball, I need you to lie about a prophecy because Cyrus needs to choose a bride. He cannot be crowned without a bride, and he has to be crowned by the end of the summer. So I need you to lie about a prophecy that says something about his future bride. And Violet is like, okay, I'll do it, I suppose. But like I mentioned, Violet is very self-protective and does not want to leave court. So she's kind of caught between two different sides of the situation. Is she supposed to follow the king's orders, or is she supposed to protect herself and keep her spot at court? And so this book is about that, but also more than that. I just don't know how to weave it into the summary without giving away too much, so I'm just gonna leave it at that. But this was, oh right, I think it says on Goodreads that it's also a retelling. I am not sure what it's a retelling of. However, I know that there are several different fairy tales kind of woven into the story, so it might just be that it's like a retelling of several different fairy tales, if that's what they mean on Goodreads. I definitely got the fairy tale vibe from this book. I thought that was super fun, and I love a good fairy tale, so that really spoke to me. I will say though, this was pitched as, what was it? The Cruel Prince mixed with possibly Serpent and Dove or something. I see the resemblances, but at the same time, not completely. I thought this was very much its own thing. Like, I do see what they mean, but I wouldn't take it seriously, or at least not too seriously. I'm guessing with the Serpent and Dove comparison, it's more that she's a witch, kind of a witch, and there's an enemies to lovers situation as well. And with the Cruel Prince, it's because we're at court. So Violet is kind of like a bit of an outsider, just like Jude is in the Cruel Prince, and we also have to do with the prince, again, an enemies to lovers situation as well. But as for the rest of it, I feel like it was very much its own thing. You just got a few tropes that, you know, you also have in the other two books. So that is basically where I draw the comparison, but other than that, I would say it's very much its own thing. For a debut, I thought this was very pleasant in the way that it was written. I will say it was a little bit, it kind of took me, like, there's... How do I say this? Usually with YA, I won't expect swearing, for example. At least not, I'm not gonna say it in the video, but the F word, for example. I feel like I swear a lot, so like it doesn't really faze me at all. Like, I don't care if it's in my books whatsoever. I'm still gonna say it in the video, but I don't care if it's in my books. But it's not a word that I expect to come across in YA, and there was an instance of it in this one, as far as I remember, that kind of took me by surprise. I was like, am I not reading YA? Hello? And then later on, there was also a little bit of smut, or at least close to smut. Not like super explicit, but more explicit than I've come across in other YA books. So I just wanted to mention that because again, it kind of took me by surprise. I was expecting a fade to black because that's what YA does a lot of the time, but maybe this is just a little bit upper YA or something. Although there was not a whole lot of it. I just want to, just so we're clear, just like a little bit of it. Other than that, Violet is also pitched as a morally gray character, which I don't think she is. I didn't read that until after I'd finished the book, and it really surprised me because I don't think she's morally gray. She's definitely on a side, but she's more like on her own side. However, she doesn't want to hurt anyone. So like, to protect herself, she doesn't necessarily just want to give up anybody. So it's not like she's willing to sacrifice other people for her own good, if you get what I mean. She's not gray in that way. So I'm not sure why they try to pitch her as a morally gray character. Her morals are very much on the good side. She's just a little bit overprotective of herself. But with her past, I also get it. And also with her whole position at court, I get it. She's very much alone. So there were a couple of things that I just want to point out before you go and read the synopsis elsewhere that I'm not sure it actually fits with the book itself. That said though, I had a lot of fun reading this, although it was a little bit confusing at times. I think the whole gods concept wasn't explained enough. I would have liked a little bit more information on that. I loved the tension, but it was very much back and forth a lot. I wouldn't say it's straight up miscommunication, but it did feel a little bit like miscommunication, so if that is something that bothers you, it's worth keeping in mind. At least to me, it felt a bit like miscommunication. But overall, I would say this was just fun, although a tiny bit confusing at times. And there was something about the ending. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it did not do me much good. I remember being a little bit disappointed with it. Not the very ending, but like the climax of the story. Maybe it was that it was over way too quickly or something. I can't fully remember what it was, but it kind of disappointed me a little bit. This is why I need to write reviews right after I finish a book so I can get my thoughts out, so I can actually go back and check them before I talk about the books with you. I should start doing that. Yeah, I should start doing that, or at least like take notes or something. But I haven't taken any, so this is where we're at basically. But there was something disappointing about the ending. However, I'm super excited to be reading book 2 whenever it is out, because we do end on a little bit of a cliffhanger, but at least like when it comes to the characters, not the story itself. But yeah, I thought it was fun, so just gotta write a review about it so I can actually remember what happened. Oops. Next up, we're talking about The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune, which is one of the books that I read during my 24-hour readathon. This is an adult contemporary fantasy. Yeah, is that what I want to call it? Yeah. And this is like a vibes book. This is a feel good, feel warm, feel cozy kind of book. In it, we follow our lead guy whose name is Linus Baker. He is a caseworker forgot the name of the organization, but they essentially handle like orphanages for kids with magical powers, or just like powers. Or if they're magical creatures, those also exist in this world. And Linus loves his job and he's very, very good at it. However, other than his job, he doesn't really have much else. He also has a cat, but that's about it. He basically does the same day in and day out. He doesn't really have much of a home life. He focuses a lot on his work, but he does like his job because he likes to talk to these kids. He's very thorough with his job, you know, yes, the whole thing. And then one day he's called to the upper floor, the upper management of whatever this organization is called, because I really cannot remember. It's an abbreviation. I can't remember letters. I don't know what it is. So move on. And they have a special assignment for him because they need him to go to this house, which is an orphanage that is kind of far from like society, if you will. It's on an island, and at this orphanage there are 6 kids that are a little bit dangerous, especially one of them. So he's basically sent out there to make sure that everything is running smoothly, that the kids are doing okay, but also kind of they want him to be very strict about it. They're basically asking him to find an excuse to shut down this orphanage. But he's not told much about the kids before he goes there. He's not told much about the owner of the orphanage either before he goes there. So he's left with a file on each person at the orphanage and he's sent off. And when he gets there, he's introduced to everyone and it's a whole thing. It's very fun. It's very charming, it's very cute, it's warm and fuzzy, it's such a good time. So, but also there's more to it that there's also like a whole plot with the villagers there, that the ones that live in the city that's close to the island. I'm not gonna get into it, but just know that there's prejudice involved. But other than that, the plot is definitely that he's getting to know the characters at this orphanage, he's getting to know the owner of the orphanage as well. There might be a little bit of a love story between the two. He might also have some secrets, you know, the whole thing. But overall, this is a very cute, very vibey kind of book. And I enjoyed it so much. I almost gave it 5 stars. Almost gave it 5 stars. I can't pinpoint what it is, but I feel like it was missing like the last bit to get 5 stars. But overall, I enjoyed this so much. The children at the orphanage were so good. I talked about this in my readathon. It's not up on the channel yet, so I've not had a chance to share my thoughts, but it'll be up later this weekend, so I'll go into them a little bit more in that video. What I did mention though, and I remember this, is that I've also read Under the Whispering Door by TJ Klune and I didn't really like it. It wasn't a bad book, I just didn't agree with the ending and the humor in it kind of felt forced at times, whereas this one, the humor comes very naturally through the kids because the kids are so charming and cute. So it had a better flow when it came to the humor. I feel like TJ Klune's humor as an author as well shines through this book a lot better than it did in Under the Whispering Door. So I really had a good time with this and I was so scared going into it that I wasn't going to like it because I didn't like Under the Whispering Door. So to those of you who asked me to read this, thank you. I loved it. If you want to know a little bit more about what I thought, my thoughts will be shared in the readathon though, while they were new and fresh. So I don't know what else I want to say in this video other than I just enjoyed it. It was so cute. A vibesy kind of book. Sometimes you don't need like a fast-paced kind of plot with like, the world is in danger. Sometimes you just need to sit down with a cozy book, and that is the cozy book. So if you're looking for that kind of book, I would highly recommend this. Next up, should we talk about the other books that I read during the readathon? Yeah, let's do that. I also read They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera, which is a young adult contemporary. Is it a little bit sci-fi fantasy? I mean, you could argue. In They Both Die at the End, we follow 2 guys. Their names are Mateo and Rufus. They live in a version of our world where at midnight, or at least like around midnight, you're called by this company organization that basically, if you're supposed to die that day, they will let you know that you'll die within the next 24 hours. It's called the Deathcast, you know, like a forecasting? Is that what it's called? Weather? Like a weather forecasting? So Deathcast? Why does that sound weird to me? I can't English today. It's fine. And so Mateo and Rufus, both on this day, have been told by the Deathcast people that they're going to die within the next 24 hours. They're not being told how, why, or anything, or exactly when during the day. They're just told that they're dying today. And so a little bit of time passes while they're kind of processing this fact. They both are dealing with their own things. I forgot who is who, so I can't really tell. But I think Mateo he's dealing with a father who is currently in a coma, and Rufus is living at like a foster home situation, and there's a thing with a girl as well. So they both have their own situations to take care of while also knowing that they're gonna die this day. So after a little bit of processing time, they go on this, what's it called? It's an app that's called End Day, where you can find your last friend. You can either find your last friend in someone who's not dying on the day, or you can, you know, befriend other people who are dying on the same day. So they get in contact with each other, and basically it's about them living out their last day together. So them building their friendship and doing different things. It's a very surreal world that they live in. I would not want to know. Like, all I'm saying is, all I learned from this book is that I would not want to know. I don't want to know. I think I'd be completely on edge literally all day. Like, I could not relax. I not want to know. That's the main thing I took away from this book. Other than that, I didn't think this was badly written. I just think that I ended up not liking it as much as I thought I would. I wasn't saddened by it, and I thought I was going to be sad because they both die at the end, obviously. It's in the title. It's not a spoiler. So I don't know. Maybe I didn't connect with the characters enough. Maybe I didn't connect with the friendship enough, but I just didn't and ended up not really feeling much when they died. I actually think the story as well lost its pacing a little bit throughout the middle of the book. They weren't really doing all the things that I thought they were going to do, but then again, it wasn't cheesy either because it wasn't overdone in any way. Also, knowing that there was going to be romance in this, I'm just gonna say this, but it was like all of a sudden to me, I did not pick up on anything, and I was actually getting confused because I knew that there was going to be romance in it, and then I thought because the two guys hadn't really hinted at anything, at least not to my knowledge, I hadn't noticed. Maybe I just don't notice, I was actually lying on my couch frustrated because I was like, am I just not noticing flirting or what's going on here? When is the romance starting? And it wasn't starting, at least not to me. And then all of a sudden it was there and I was like, where did it come from? Almost like Adam Silvera decided, okay, well they should also like each other like that, And then they were cute. Don't get me wrong. They were cute. I just feel like it was very out of the blue all of a sudden. So if you're wondering why the romance is why it's pitched like a romance, at least it was to me, but you're not really seeing the romance aspect of it, it'll pop up all of a sudden. Also, we'll say on the back it says to live a lifetime in a single day, like they're supposed to go on a great adventure and live a lifetime in a single day. They didn't really go on that much of an adventure. So that's why I thought there was going to be this whole thing with the two of them, but it wasn't as much as I thought it was going to be, so I guess I was let down a little bit in that way. And yeah, I just didn't connect with the characters as much as I thought I had to. But then again, I am also not good at young adult contemporary. I have come to that conclusion, so that might be one of the reasons. I just am a little bit saddened that I didn't like this as much as I thought I was going to, because this was basically also pitched to me as heart-wrenching. And it really wasn't to me. I don't know. Overall, would I still recommend this? Yes. But not if you're not really into young adult contemporary, I think. I think that's my input on this one. And then the last book that I read during my readathon is, I haven't cut the tabs on this one, so they might be a little bit annoying, but it is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is an adult contemporary romance, but also historical fiction, because we do kind of jump between two different timelines in this one. So we follow Rachel? Is her name Rachel? Monique. Why did I thought it was Rachel? Who's Rachel? I don't know who Rachel is, but we follow Monique, who is a journalist. And we also follow Evelyn Hugo, who is basically this old Hollywood star. So Evelyn Hugo has very recently donated a couple of dresses to a charity for breast cancer, or a charity for a foundation that raises money to breast cancer research. You know the deal. I just don't know if I phrased it correctly, so there's an explanation. And in connection with this charity, the magazine that Monique works at wants to do an interview with Evelyn Hugo. However, Evelyn hasn't done an interview in ages. She's a bit of a recluse. Nobody's really talked to her, nobody's really seen her, she kind of keeps to herself, and it's basically impossible to get an interview with her. However, she actually ends up contacting the magazine that Monique works at and says, I will do an interview with you if Monique Grant, I think her name is, Monique Grant gets to write it. And Monique is like, what the heck is going on? Because she doesn't know Evelyn, she doesn't have any connections to her, she's never met the woman, she's never talked to her, so why is Evelyn Hugo so interested in Monique? So Monique is sent off to Evelyn's Upper East Side very, very expensive luxury apartment, and when she gets there, it turns out Evelyn doesn't actually want to do an interview for the magazine. No, she wants to tell her whole life story, every little gory detail, to let Monique write a book about Evelyn Hugo so that she has the manuscript. And a book like that could sell for millions of dollars. Millions. So Monique is kind of puzzled about this. Obviously really wants the money, but also has to deal with the magazine not getting an interview, and is very puzzled why out of all the people on the planet, Evelyn Hugo would be interested in giving her this opportunity. And as it turns out, the two women's stories might actually be, or they are, I don't know why I say might, because they are, actually intertwined in a way that I will not tell you, but is definitely a very big surprise to Monique once she finds out. So I think my neighbors can hear me because they keep laughing randomly and I can't really tell why, and all I'm thinking is they can hear me and they think I'm talking to myself, don't they? In another language as well. I mean, fair, but it's making it a bit awkward, you know? But anyway, we're talking about Evelyn Hugo. So this was my first Taylor Jenkins Reid book. I was very nervous going into it because I know that this is like super well loved. Did it live up to its name? To me, yes. But I'm also very touched in general by adult contemporary romance, if there's romance involved. Which, we're talking like about all of Evelyn's husbands. Don't think that there's necessarily romance involved in every relationship she's had, because Evelyn is a very, very interesting character. I'm gonna watch out with how much I say, but she's very much, she'll do what it takes to get where she wants to be, you know? And that is definitely one of the reasons that she's had 7 husbands. But yeah, I was nervous going into it because it's just so well loved. For me, this lived up to its potential. It lived up to its name. It lived up to the hype. I thought it was beautiful. I thought it was touching. It's also kind of feminist in a way, I would say. I don't know how much truth there is to how the industry worked back then, but I could definitely see it. Like, I would believe that that is actually how it worked. I would believe that to some extent it still works that way. It's never been an industry that's been very nice to women in general. So it was definitely fascinating to read about a character who's kind of become this huge name within the movie industry and how she got to that point, and get to know the different things that happened throughout her personal life as well, how some things were hidden from the media. I'm talking about this as if Evelyn Hugo is a real person. She's not, but she kind of felt like a real person at times, you know? Like, the whole prologue, or at least the first 2 chapters, really made me think, if this was a real book about a real person, I don't read biographies or memoirs. I don't. But I would read that. I would. And then I did, but it's fictional, you know. Anyway, it was really good. I really, really enjoyed this. I can see myself rereading this in the future at some point. Even though I know what happens, even though I know all the little details, I can see myself reading it totally. I just really loved Evelyn Hugo as a character. I thought she's a badass in a way. I can definitely see why she wouldn't necessarily be everyone's cup of tea, because she's very myself first, like definitely very much it's me over everyone else, but I can kind of respect her for it at the same time. Like, it does take a certain amount of elbow pushing to get to the top, especially in an industry like that, so you kind of have to be a little bit ruthless, if you will, and Evelyn definitely is. Loved her character. I enjoyed the writing so much. I thought it was beautiful. It was very straight to the point, not choppy, not like that, but straight to the point, not hiding any detail, not trying to be beautiful, but I still feel like it was, but it was like very stripped in a way. I don't know how to, like, it felt real. You know? It just felt very real. Yeah, I think that's the best way I can describe it. But I also talk about that in the 24-hour readathon. Ah, no! Evelyn doesn't want to stand on her own feet. That is so ironic. And then we got 5 more books to talk about. I've sat here for such a long time, haven't I? Next up, I want to talk about Harrow the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. I don't know how to pronounce her last name. Still don't know. Still have no idea. But Harrow the Ninth is the sequel to Gideon the Ninth, and I read Gideon the Ninth in August, was it? So I bought Harrow the Ninth on Kindle. I also have the Illumicrate set incoming. I really wanted to read Harrow before the set got here, and it was, oh my gosh, it was confusing. That one I did write a review on Goodreads, by the way. I can't say much about what's going on in the sequel because I would be ruining the whole plot of the first one, but the first one at least. I can't really, because that's not, I am caught a little bit here because the first one doesn't really have super much to do with this. Well, does it though? this is confusing. This pretty much sums up my experience with Harrow the Ninth though, and if you've read both Gideon and Harrow, you'd know why I'm struggling. But anyway, let's just talk about the plot in the first one at least. We follow Gideon, who is an orphan in House 9, or not House 9, Ninth house. So we have like different planets, and the different planets belong to the different houses. There is 2 through 9, so second house, third house, etc., etc. And we follow Gideon, who is from the 9th house, so the 9th planet, but is an orphan, doesn't know what happened to her parents. She loves dirty magazines, and she loves her two-hand sword. She's really good at wielding it. And life is not easy for her on the planet. She wants to escape to somewhere else. I don't know where. I don't remember. But she wants to escape. She hates everyone there. Not everyone. Close to everyone there. Especially Harrow Hark, Nonagesimus, who is the Reverend daughter. She's basically like supposed to lead the 9th house, I suppose, or something like that. Yeah, something like that. She's like the lead necromancer. She's also the last necromancer that they have. It's a whole thing. But Gideon especially hates Harrow, and Harrow is not too fond of Gideon either. However, the king, the forever king, or the everlasting, he has a lot of names. Let's just go with the king, has sent out a message to everyone that he needs lictors. So lictors are like super necromancers. I am not going to go into too much detail about lictors. I was about to say about necromancers, but I'm not going to do that either. There's a whole thing there. Just know that Harrow is specializing in bones, essentially. Like, she's very good at making bone structures, and, you know, she's very good at bones. And she has read this message from the king, has to go to the first house and solve some puzzles along with necromancers from the other houses and figure out how they can become lictors so that they can work for the king. And that is what the first one is about. I didn't tell you how Gideon fits into that. So every necromancer has to bring along a cavalier, which is basically like a swordsman, who is supposed to protect their necromancer in these trials and during the puzzles and everything. The cavalier is assigned to a necromancer at the necromancer's birth, but while Harrow does have a cavalier, his mother does not want him to go with Harrow. And on the day Gideon has planned to flee 9th house, flee the planet, Harrow's cavalier and his mom ends up basically taking her escape route, and they die. And so Harrow is like, listen, Gideon, if you go with me to the first house, once we go back, I will let you leave. Because she has put a stop to so many of Gideon's escape attempts before, but now she's given her the opportunity to basically earn her freedom. So Gideon is like, are you for real? And Harrow is like, yes. Harrow's she doesn't say much. And so Gideon ends up going with Harrow to the first planet, the first house, to do all these puzzles and the trials and everything else, and figure out how Harrow can become a lictor. And that is what the first one is about. It's very slow, just keep reading, I promise. It'll get there, I promise. It'll be a lot of fun once you hit the halfway through mark, I promise. But as for the sequel, so I loved this. I think I gave it a 4.8. Not a full-on 5, sort of the situation with, or the same situation as House in the Cerulean Sea. I felt like it was almost a 5, but it was just missing a little bit. The thing about Harrow the Ninth is that this book, and I'm really gonna watch out with how much I say because I don't want to ruin the experience for anyone, but it's confusing and it's supposed to be, so if you start reading it and you're like, what the heck is going on? It's a part of the experience. You just kind of have to remember to read everything. Be confused because you're supposed to be confused. Like, you're supposed to keep guessing and you're supposed to just go with it and just read. Continue to read. I promise at some point you will get it. I'm not gonna say much more than that because I'm afraid that I'll like hint at something and I don't want to ruin the experience for anybody else. But if you go into the book and you're like, what the heck is going on here? How is everyone loving this? I don't get what's going on. I don't think you're supposed to understand what's going on. It's a very, very confusing book. It's a very weird experience. Not everything is laid out for you. Not everything is served on a silver platter. It's just, you kind of have to just believe in the process, trust the process, and just go with it. I kind of had I was like, nobody told me, but I was lucky that I guessed. I just kind of had to follow wherever this was gonna take me and just believe that it was gonna make sense. So I ended up sticking to it, but I could see why this would be a DNF if you weren't aware, because it is such a confusing read, but it's very much supposed to be. It's a different kind of book, that's for sure. It's a different kind of experience, and it was very fascinating. I am super interested in knowing what's going on with the third one, because I don't see how, I don't know. I'm a fan of these books now though. It's like a very different kind of experience than so many other books that I've read. They're just built up in a different way. I don't know. I can't say much more, but they're very interesting. I will say though, you definitely have to be into the kind of humor that Tamsin implements in their books. If you don't like this kind of like gritty kind of humor, maybe go look up on some tweets. Watch out for spoilers. Tweets? Did I just say tweets? I meant quotes. What in the world is wrong with me? Go read up on some quotes so you'll know what kind of humor we're talking about, but it's definitely gritty and sarcastic and a little bit dirty at times. Not a little bit, a lot of dirty at times. It's definitely a kind of like a specific kind of humor, and if you're not into that, you won't love these books. But if you're into that kind of humor, Tamsin is a meme lord, essentially. I love the kind of humor, which is also one of the reasons that I kept on reading Harrow, and other than just being very curious. I was so confused, but it was so good. Tamsin is a different kind of writer, but it's so fascinating, and it's such good, everything is weaved together in such a fascinating, it's well weaved, like, it's good. Okay, it's amazing. Yeah, but confusing. I think that's all I gotta say. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's all I gotta say about Harrow, but just be aware that it's okay to be confused. Oh, I forgot to say, but they're very much adult. And then they're like just like a funny mix of sci-fi and fantasy. Very interesting, so I'm looking forward to Nona a lot. Then we got four, not two. Yeah. Okay, next up, The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon, which is an adult high fantasy. She's a chonker. I just said chonker. She's chonky. Yeah, she's very thick. 830 pages. I took this like 50 pages at a time, and that was the perfect pace for me when it came to taking on this book. So, just wanted to say that before I forgot. But in this book, I didn't actually know what it was about going into it. So that was very interesting. I can highly recommend. All that I knew was that there was a world divided, a queendom without an heir, and also something about an ancient enemy, but that was it. That was all I knew going into this book. I can recommend it. That said though, I'm gonna explain what this book was about now. There are chapters below on the timeline, by the way, if you now want to skip. But in this book, we follow a different set of POVs. Oh my gosh, this is gonna be so difficult to summarize. Essentially, it's more like seeing how a world comes together. A world that has different sets of people, different kinds of people, depending on where you are, that have different kinds of religion, that aren't necessarily getting along, that overall have a very hard time working together. And also coming to an agreement on how history has passed. History is very tied to religion in this world. Stories have been retold in certain parts of the world that, you know, I can't really get into that, but I wouldn't necessarily say that it's super much about the characters that we're following. It feels more like it's about the world. The world figuring out and finally coming to this conclusion that they gotta work together because there's an ancient enemy that has been asleep for, I think, 1,000 years that's waking up. And if this enemy wakes up, it's a ginormous dragon, by the way. If it wakes up, it'll basically cause the end of the world. But we do have a woman who is from the Priory of the Orange Tree, and she has been trained throughout her life to basically be a bit of like a master assassin, if you will. She also, actually I'm not gonna say that. Be surprised. We also follow a dragon rider. So on the east side of this world, dragons are like gods. On the west side of this world, dragons are very dangerous and are basically enemies. But she's not from the east side of the world, and over there they worship dragons almost. They see them as gods, but we also have some people that are trained to actually be dragon riders. So they literally ride on the dragons. They're also trained to be master warriors. So we follow one of them as well. Who else do we follow? We follow someone who is at court, where the first person that I talked about, she's also at court, where the queen is, the queen who doesn't have an heir. But the other person that we follow from the court is a guy who's a lord, I think he is. I don't really know what his story is. Well, he's supposed to be an heir to an area of this world as well, but he doesn't actually want to be an heir because he loves court life. And he also was sent on a mission at some point. I'm not gonna say what the mission is about, but he's sent on a mission. And then the last character that we follow is an alchemist. He is something else as well, but he was exiled by the queen because he'd promised her to make a life, or like a life elixir, so that she could become an immortal, and he failed on his promise. And then there's a story about a past lover, like the love of his life, who has died, and we follow his life as well and where he goes. And yeah, but those are the 4 points of views. They all have their own little story they all have their own story as well, their own backgrounds. They're 4 very different characters, and still the main focus of this book is on this like bigger picture, which is basically the world. So you're told a lot of myths throughout the book, a lot of stories, a lot of like the green tabs. I don't know if you can see, but the green tabs are basically world building, so explanations about the world, but also stories. It has to do with religion. There's world building up until 100 pages left or something. 200. It's a thick book. 200 pages left. It was a lot. A whole lot. But it was so fascinating. So I don't read a lot of this like slower paced, slow world building, big payoff, high fantasy. I don't read a lot of that. I'm still reading The Way of Kings, by the way. I kind of have put it on pause, and then I've had a hard time picking it up again, not because I don't remember what's going on in the book, but just because it's been such a long time since the last time I read. I think something it also has to do with the fact that I can't sit in my living room and read it because the book is so big. It was a little bit easier with this one, but I don't really read a lot of like high fantasy because it very much intimidates me. This is not an exception, but I'm so proud of myself for actually getting through this, and I loved it. The world was just, and this might just be me who's not like super knowledgeable when it comes to high fantasy, because again, I don't read a lot of it, but I felt like, to me, this was beautifully written, beautifully built up. The world building kept being interesting to me. Will I say that it was super original with the whole like, there's an ancient enemy that awakens? No. But a lot of the stories, I love the skin that this story was in, if that makes sense. Like, I see the comparison to Lord of the Rings because we do have this ancient enemy that awakens, the ancient enemy is already awoken in Lord of the Rings, but there is still this like ancient enemy that could cause the end of the world, basically. So I see the comparisons. So that's what I mean when I liked the skin that the story was in. Like, I liked that it was kind of a classic, good old big enemy, let's work together to get it down kind of story, but I liked all the different nuances there was to this one, how the world was in this one. I liked it. I liked the dragons. I liked the religious aspect, or the religion aspect to it. I liked what was going on in the Priory. I thought that was super interesting. So I hope that makes sense when I say the skin that this was in. It's just maybe a little bit weird to put it like that, but the only thing I have to note is go into this with tabs. Unless you're really good at remembering, or if you're reading on Kindle, make sure you highlight, because you will have to go back sometimes and remind yourself of certain things. There were a lot of names to keep track of. I have read Game of Thrones, so it's not as bad as Game of Thrones names-wise, but there's a lot of names to remember. There's a lot of characters. You only have 4 points of views, but there's still a lot of characters to remember. The queen has like a whole set of handmaidens, for example, and you have to remember quite a lot of them. So that was a little bit confusing to me at times. I had to like remind myself a lot, which is why tabbing is such a good thing, or highlighting if you're on Kindle. So I would highly recommend that, but I think I would recommend that with any thicker book, to be honest. And other than that, loved the dragons. I love this like idea of dragons being gods and just, they're not really gods, but more like, that's what they call them. Like, that's the amount of respect they have for dragons on the east side of this world. And I just love that. Dragons should appear in books more often. Why don't they? More authors need to write about dragons because dragons are awesome. But if I had to point out something negative and why I'm not giving this as straight up 5 stars, I thought the ending was wrapped up so quickly. The climax for a book this thick, the climax was over with so quickly. It should have been a little bit longer. I don't know what could have been added to it, but it was just over so quickly. I was sat in my couch or on my couch and just been like, was that it? Was that really it? It was over way too quickly, so that dragged it down a little bit. But as for the rest, I loved it. I loved it. I loved being in this world a little bit and sinking into it a little bit more day by day by reading those 50 pages. So I now completely am in love with the Priory of the Orange Tree. I'm looking forward to The Day of Fallen Night, I think it's called, which is coming out here next year. I think it's in January. But I'm not entirely sure, so don't quote me on that. But it was good. It was beautiful. The writing itself as well was very, very pleasant to me. I had no qualms over it whatsoever. So a very, very enjoyable experience. And also one that I've been told to read by you guys, actually. So 3 more books. I promise I'll make at least the last 2 a little bit shorter. Next up, though, we got ourselves another YA. It is Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. And it's a contemporary fantasy. It's also a retelling, or at least it uses elements from the King Arthur stories. So, in this book, we follow Bree, who is a student at a college. I think it's a college. It's not a college, it's a high school. She just lives there, which is confusing to me, but anyway, she's 16, so it's definitely a high school. A couple of months before this book starts, Bree lost her mother in a car accident, and so Bree has been fighting with this. She's not feeling good because of this, obviously. She lost her mother that she loved, and shortly after this accident, she also talked to a policeman who something weird went on with that conversation, and Bree she can't really figure out what happened, but something felt off. So, a few months ahead, Bree is at high school where she lives in a dorm and is trying to get back into life again after this tragedy. She's not having a very easy time with it. It's hard adjusting to a life without her mom. And so her and her friend that she shares a dorm with decides to go out on literally the first evening while they're at this high school. I think it was the first evening. They decide to go out, experience the high school experience, but something happens, something very weird. There's an attack of some kind. A weird creature is descending on people, and it seems like the creature's sucking out their energies. It's very strange. As it turns out, Bree is not supposed to be able to see this creature, and she's busted seeing this creature by a couple of people who do something to Bree so that she can't remember her seeing this, but Bree still remembers. And Bree is a very headstrong character. She's a very curious character. So she decides to take it upon herself to figure out, who are these people? Why am I seeing these creatures? What the heck is going on at this campus? And finds out that there's a whole secret society that is in some way kind of connected to King Arthur and his different knights of the Round Table. And she gets caught up in all that business. And as it also turns out, there might be more to Bree's mother's death than she first thought. And so she decides to kind of infiltrate the secret society to figure out if they know anything about her mother's death. Oh, and Bree might also have magic, as you can... It's also mentioned in the synopsis, but I don't know how to put it into my summary. So, Bree might also have magic, as it shows on the cover. So oh gosh, I'm gonna have a hard time talking about this because I know that it's probably why I saved it for almost the end of the video. But I know it's a very, very well-loved book. It has an extremely high rating on Goodreads if you go look at it. I think it's 4.45, which is basically unheard of, except for maybe The House in the Cerulean Sea. Also, The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. They're about not the same, but it's very, very uncommon that you come across a book that has that high of a rating, especially YA fantasy, or actually especially rom-coms. But there's not a lot within YA fantasy either. So going into this, I was expecting like super fun, super fast-paced, action-packed, and then it just frustrated me because I felt like nothing picked up until the book is split up into 4 parts. Not because there's a gap between the parts. I don't actually know why it was split up into 4 parts. Are they called different things maybe? Yeah, I'm not really sure about the parts, to be honest. But, I mean, there are different phases of her kind of getting to know this secret society. But other than that, I can't really explain why. But for me, it didn't really pick up until the last part. The whole explanation of the secret society was so confusing to me, and while you're having this explained, it also is super info dumpy because it basically is explained in like one long monologue by one of the characters. That's not how I like my information to be delivered to me when I read books in monologues. I don't like that. That's not for me. And on top of that, I think I might have also just been a little bit unlucky because there's both a case of, at least to me, insta-love in this one, but also a love triangle kind of looming over everything. And I don't like love triangles. It's not my thing. I don't like insta-love. We've talked about that earlier in this video. I don't like it. I don't enjoy it. I get that when you have 2 different characters that Brie has to kind of start to like in some way, that it has to be sped up a little bit, but I felt like it was way too sped up. It got way too quickly to that point. I know that if you read the book, you would tell me that there's a bit of an explanation for it, but either I didn't understand the explanation or the explanation wasn't explained super well. So I'm not fully buying it, but like, was it just said to justify that the love situation was a bit instant, or am I just not understanding the connection there? I'm not really sure. There were a lot of things I didn't understand about this book, at least not until like 150 pages further into it. So it was a very frustrating and slow book for at least the first 60%. The ending though was really good. I felt like it picked up towards the end. I'm still kind of interested in Bloodmarked, which is the sequel. I can't remember when it comes out. Is it this month or November? I don't remember, but I'm still interested in it. I'm not like dying to get it right when it's out, but I still want to pick it up at some point. But I don't know, this just didn't live up to the expectations that I have for it. It's very limited what I can say on this, but as an example, Brie having magic is meant, like having powers is mentioned in the synopsis, but the synopsis is not actually over with until 50% into the book, and that is not really how I like my stories to progress. I like them to progress faster than that. So it was a pacing thing. Most of my issue with this book was a pacing thing. And then the insta-love trope that you really cannot see. I'm gonna keep them here. The insta-love trope, which is like my arch nemesis. It's unfortunately something that you can kind of come across quite often in YA, so it's a bit like, I'm not a stranger to it, I just never enjoy it. I like there to be some pining, you know? I like there to be some uncertainty. I like there to be some confusement about your feelings. Well, that's just my personal preference. I can totally see why this would be for some people though, but I think a mix of the insta-love with a looming love triangle and also the info dumpiness was just kind of not doing it for me. Loved the whole concept of it though. Was very, very curious about a King Arthur kind of inspired story because I've not come across that. I don't have any other. I have seen some, but I don't have any of them, like retellings of King Arthur stories, or the legend of King Arthur, I should call it. And I enjoyed certain subjects, certain topics also being woven into the story. I just had a hard time with it, essentially. But it just is like that with some books, I suppose. And then lastly, we're talking about 2 books. Adult contemporary romances that my sister told me to read. She basically handed these to me and was like, you want to read smut? Because my sister reads smut. You've been blasted on my channel now, sis. Too bad. But she basically handed me The Roommate and also The Intimacy Experiment by Rosie Denon. I think that's, I don't really know how to pronounce their last name. And these are two standalones, but in the same series. They're companion novels, and they're, at least the first one is super smutty. You think the sequel would be, but it's not. But with this name, you think the sequel would be, but it's not as smutty as the first one. The first one is like, I'm just gonna quickly say this. It's like smutty in like a ridiculous kind of way that personally I found funny, but I would see why other people would just find it ridiculous, you know? Like, I could see why you would have that view on it. I just thought it was funny. So, quickly recapping these two. The first one, we follow two people that one has just moved to, is it LA? Let's just say it's LA. From New York. She moved in with her old childhood friend who she's kind of been crushing on for years and years, who has then gone on tour because he's a musician. So she ends up with a new roommate instead, who is a porn star. And our girl is very, very innocent in the way that she doesn't know who he is, but everyone else seems to know who he is. So she decides to Google him one day, figures it out. There's a whole thing there, that's fine. And how much can I actually say? He's like, he is very much into, like, his main audience is women. That's the kind of, can I even say that word on YouTube? I already said it once, but that's the kind of entertainment he does. You know, I don't know. Anyway, so he's like, female pleasure is very important. Oh gosh, we're really going there. That's fine. And she's also like, yes, female pleasure is very important. So the two of them decide to somehow do something about that women don't, that not a lot of, there's not a lot of education for women on that out there. Not necessarily just for women, but I mean, I actually really respect that point, I will say. It's just very hard to talk about and make it YouTube friendly, but I respect that point. The point was being made and I respect it. I agree with it. There's not a lot of education for women out there when it comes to that. So, oh gosh, this is ridiculous. I'm aware of it though. But anyway, they have to work together on this project that they make, and you know, they're roommates. There's a lot of forced proximity. That sort of situation. You get where I'm going with this? Okay. In the sequel though, we follow her name is Naomi. Her name is Naomi, and she is actually the dude from the first book's ex-girlfriend and also ex-colleague slash recording partner. So she's in the same line of business as he's in. She's also been helping them on this project. Yes, this project that they're doing that I'm not going to talk about. Read the book, figure it out, read about it. But in the sequel, she has another project that she runs with this dude who is a rabbi. And it is basically like a, what do they call it? A bussy seminar on modern intimacy. So like, think like dating advice, getting to know each other advice, getting to be, or to a point where you're used to each other and like what you can do, and yes, modern intimacy. Yes, that's what they start working together on at his synagogue. Is that what it's called? Judaism? Yes, it's a synagogue. Okay, so that's what the sequel is about. Oh, and them getting to know each other and stuff. So I enjoyed the roommate a lot better than the intimacy experiment, and mainly because the chemistry between the two main characters was a lot better in the roommate than it was in the intimacy experiment. I've been sat here talking for like 2 hours by now. I literally can't anymore. We're gonna make this quick though. I also thought it was a lot funnier than the sequel, although very ridiculous at times, but I didn't mind the ridiculousness so much. I thought it was just, I mean, some of it felt like excuses to put smut in there, but like it was a little bit on the nose, if you will. But I still thought it was fun. I still thought it was a fun read. Was it amazing? No. Was the other one amazing? No. I have read rom-coms that were better than these two, but I still had a fun time. I will say not so much with the sequel. I also feel like Naomi, you know her through the roommate, but she loses a bit of her own self in the sequel. She didn't feel like the same character. She's the character that I would actually love normally, and I loved her in the first one. I thought she was kind of mean, but like she means well. And then she kind of loses that a little bit. She's not as girl boss in the sequel as she is in in the first one, and I thought that was a shame. So that was the thing, but like overall, they were not necessarily, they weren't amazingly written either, but they weren't badly written either. The slow burn was just too slow in this one for my liking, considering like the pacing was off. There wasn't much to it other than self-doubt, and there was just a little bit too much self-doubt. So I hope I'm making sense, but I'm also trying to make this very short because I wasn't really planning on going into depth with these two books because I mainly read them because my sister told me to. But like, the first one at least felt like a good excuse to get some smut out there with two characters that were charming and kind of fun. And then the sequel just felt like it felt like it had taken a turn that it didn't need to take. It wasn't as comedic as the first one, but it wasn't really being serious either. It was just like there wasn't a whole lot to it. I'm actually kind of confused. Now that I think back on it, what was there? I'm not really sure. But I definitely enjoyed the roommate situation. I thought the whole concept of that was a lot of fun. The premise of it was a lot of fun. So if you're looking for like a smutty, ridiculous rom-com, I would actually recommend this. Not so much the sequel, but the roommate was pretty fun. So I hope they stay there and don't fall down. But anyway, that is my wrap up for last month. This video is gonna end up being so long. I also read 11 books. We had a lot to talk about. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to check out the book club, again, there's a link to it in the pinned comment. And all the books are linked, as always, in the description box as well. But that is all I got for you guys today. So I hope you all enjoyed this video. Feel free to hit the thumbs up if you did. And if you're new here and you want to hang out for more videos like this, but also TBR videos, readathons, bookish unboxings, all the different booktube stuff, definitely consider hitting the subscribe button. But I'm gonna leave you to it. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye bye.